The subway car lurched forward with its usual metallic groan, the air inside thick with the impatience of rush hour. Shoulder pressed to shoulder, commuters clutched briefcases, grocery bags, and weary expressions, each lost in the rhythm of their daily grind. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, casting a pale glow over the packed car, and the smell of iron, perfume, and city grit hung in the air like an unwelcome guest. Victoria Ashford stepped aboard, her cream-colored blazer untouched by the grime of the city, her blonde hair sleek and perfectly arranged, as if she had just walked out of an executive boardroom. And in truth, she had. 31 years old, founder of Ashford Consulting, Victoria was accustomed to navigating million-dollar negotiations, cutting through problems with surgical precision, commanding rooms where men twice her age leaned in to catch her every word. But none of that mattered here, because tucked into her arms was her 6-month-old daughter, Emma. And Emma had no regard for corporate authority or polished appearances. Emma's cheeks were flushed, her tiny fists clenched tight. Her little mouth opened wide, and the first thin wail broke through the hum of the subway car. At first, it was small, almost tentative, as though the child were testing the acoustics of the train. But then, as if gathering momentum, the cry deepened, sharpened, and stretched into the kind of full-throated scream that turned every head in the car. Victoria bounced her gently, whispering words meant to soothe. "Darling, it's all right. Mama's here. We're almost home." She reached into her designer bag, pulled out a pacifier, and offered it with practiced efficiency. Emma turned her face, rejected it, and wailed louder. Victoria tried a soft sway, shifting her weight from side to side in the narrow space she had to maneuver. But the motion was awkward in the crowded car. The baby's cries ricocheted off the steel walls, filling the space like an alarm no one could ignore. The passengers began to react. A man in a suit sighed dramatically, pulling his phone from his pocket and jamming earbuds into his ears with exaggerated speed. A woman in scrubs closed her eyes, jaw tightening, as if summoning the last fragments of patience after a 12-hour shift. The teenagers across the aisle smirked and whispered to each other, their eyes flicking toward Victoria with unkind amusement. The tension in the car thickened with each passing second, and the baby's cries rose to match it. Victoria felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She had faced down aggressive investors and skeptical clients without blinking, but here, with Emma's wails echoing through the confined space, she felt utterly powerless. She tried another tactic, slipping the bottle from her bag and offering it quickly. Emma turned her head away, coughing between cries. Victoria checked her diaper discreetly dry. Nothing worked. Nothing even softened the sharp edge of her daughter's distress. She looked up, met the eyes of a middle-aged woman across the aisle, and was met not with sympathy, but with a sharp shake of the head, as if to say, "Control your child." Victoria's chest constricted. She wanted to disappear into the metal floor of the train, to trade her blazer and briefcase for invisibility. Emma's cries only grew louder, raw now, almost desperate, a sound that cut through Victoria's composure and left her shaken. She kissed her daughter's forehead, whispering, "Please, baby girl, please." But her voice was trembling. She could feel the weight of 100 silent judgments pressing in, each sigh and roll of the eyes like a verdict. The train rattled forward, unrelenting. Victoria clutched Emma tighter, trying to shield her from the world. But the truth pressed harder against her. She, the woman who commanded millions, who carved order out of chaos, could not quiet her own child. And in that moment, she felt not like the immaculate executive in a cream blazer, but like a small, overwhelmed mother, utterly exposed under the harsh fluorescent lights of a crowded subway car. Asterisk, the train screeched into the next stop, brakes squealing as doors slid open to swallow more passengers into the already packed car. A gust of damp city air swept through, carrying with it the smell of hot pretzels and exhaust. Victoria barely noticed. She was too busy rocking Emma, her arms aching, her body rigid against the tide of stares and muffled complaints. The sound of her daughter's crying had become a relentless echo chamber inside her skull. Across the aisle, a man sat quietly with a little girl perched on his lap. His clothes were worn from a long date clinging to his jeans, the collar of his shirt damp with sweat. Yet his posture held a kind of quiet strength, the kind you only get from years of lifting more weight than your body wanted to carry, both on the job and at home. His face bore the fatigue of someone who fought through the grind of life without shortcuts. But his eyes warm, brown, steady rested not on the crowd, not on the ceiling, not on his phone like so many others. They rested on Victoria and her baby. Marcus Rivera knew that sound the deep, inconsolable cry that came from the gut. He had lived through it, once upon a time. It transported him back to nights after Maria died, when Sophia was just 2 years old and woke screaming for a mother who would never answer again. Nothing silenced her except the songs Maria used to sing, songs Marcus didn't know all the words to, but hummed anyway, stumbling through syllables, praying the notes would carry enough of her memory to comfort their daughter beside him. Sophia shifted. She was for now small and delicate, her chest rising in careful rhythm as she breathed. The doctors called it a chronic respiratory condition, a phrase that Marcus had come to hate for its vagueness and its endless bills. She clutched a stuffed elephant, threadbare at the ears, the last gift Maria had given her. Sophia leaned closer to her father and tugged gently at his sleeve. "Papa," she whispered in Spanish, her voice soft but certain. "The baby is very sad." Marcus glanced down at her, then back at the crying infant across the aisle. "See, mi hija," he murmured, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "She is sad. Sometimes babies cry because they're tired or scared or lonely." Sophia's wide, earnest eyes never left the baby. "Can we help her?" Asterisk, the question hung in the air, simple and profound. Marcus's throat tightened. Around them, the car was alive with impatience, someone muttering curses under their breath. Another passenger huffing loudly as if the noise were a personal offense. The energy was heavy, suffocating. Each sigh an unspoken accusation aimed squarely at the young mother in the cream blazer. Marcus could see it in the way her shoulders curled forward, the way her lips pressed tight to hide her own unraveling. He wanted to move, to do something. Yet hesitation crept in. What if she snapped at him? What if she thought he was intruding? In this city, strangers didn't usually cross invisible lines. They kept their heads down, stayed in their lanes. And here he was, a construction worker with calloused hands and worn boots, about to walk into the world of a woman who looked like she belonged on the cover of Forbes. But Sophia tugged again, firmer this time. "Please, Papa, she needs help." The sound of Emma's wail pierced through Marcus's doubt, cutting straight to the marrow. He remembered his own helplessness in those long, sleepless nights, how it felt to be drowning with no lifeline. And now, across the aisle, he saw the same desperation etched into Victoria's face. Her eyes glistened, though she blinked quickly to hide it. The train rattled on, fluorescent lights buzzing, passengers shifting with irritation. The judgment pressed in like a storm. Marcus took a breath, deep and steady, and stood. His movement drew curious eyes. Sophia slid off his lap, gripping her elephant tight, but following close, her small hand wrapping around his fingers with absolute trust. Asterisk, Victoria noticed immediately. Her gaze snapped to him, wary, exhausted, vulnerable. He could see the unspoken question in her eyes. "What do you want?" Marcus cleared his throat, his voice gentle, but firm enough to cut through the baby's crying and the train's clatter. "Excuse me," he said, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry to bother you, but would you mind if I tried something?" The car went strangely quiet, the moment suspended, as if the entire subway held its breath. Every passenger leaned in, eyes flicking between the crying baby, the immaculate millionaire mother, and the construction worker with his shy daughter at his side, and Victoria desperate, embarrassed. Her heart torn between suspicion and hope, had to decide whether to let a stranger into her world. At her lowest moment, asterisk, the train rattled deeper into Manhattan, its wheels grinding against the tracks like an old beast unwilling to stop. Inside the crowded car, the sound of Emma's cries had reached a fever pitch, raw, unrelenting. The kind of crying that clawed at the walls and left no corner untouched. It wasn't just background noise anymore. It was the atmosphere. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, the irritation no longer subtle. A man in a navy suit pinched the bridge of his nose, muttering, "Unbelievable," loud enough for Victoria to hear. A college student with headphones rolled her eyes dramatically, pulling the volume higher, but still glancing up with a glare that said, "Control your kid." Someone near the door laughed bitterly and muttered, "Why do people even bring babies on the subway?" The word stung like a slap, asterisk, asterisk. Victoria's arms ached from rocking Emma, her back burned from holding her posture, but her composure was fracturing. She whispered every phrase she knew, trying to disguise the desperation in her tone. "It's all right, darling. Mama's here. Just breathe with me." She tried bouncing Emma gently, then more firmly, then stood on her toes to sway despite the limited space. The pacifier was rejected again. The bottle went untouched. Emma's face was red now, her little fist thrashing against the blazer that marked her mother as powerful in the boardroom. But powerless here, each failed attempt tightened the invisible noose around Victoria's chest. She felt every pair of eyes on her eyes that didn't see the founder of a multi-million-dollar firm, but a mother losing control. Shame burned hotter than the subway's recycled air. Her stomach twisted as she imagined the videos being recorded. Her humiliation destined for strangers' feeds. Millionaire businesswoman can't even soothe her own baby. The thought made her throat close. Emma screamed harder. The sound had changed, less protest, more panic. Victoria's heart sank. She could feel her baby's fear vibrate through her skin. She kissed Emma's damp forehead, her whisper breaking now. Please, sweetheart, please stop crying. You're okay. You're okay. But she wasn't convincing anyone, not Emma, not herself. The car seemed to shrink with every second. Irritation thickened into hostility, passengers exchanging looks of solidarity that excluded her. A woman snapped her gum with deliberate force, glaring openly. A man leaned toward his friend and said, if she can't handle a baby, maybe she shouldn't have one. The words sliced through Victoria's armor, sharp and merciless. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She thought of all the mornings she conquered conference rooms with sharp retorts, outmaneuvered men twice her age with poise and strategy. None of that mattered now. None of it translated to this battlefield. Here, she was failing in the one role that mattered most. Her knees weakened. She gripped the pole with one hand, clutched Emma with the other, and blinked back tears. The humiliation was unbearable, but beneath it, something worse loomed: fear. What if something was wrong with Emma? What if this wasn't just fussing? The thought burrowed deep, clawing at her composure until her vision blurred. The baby's cries reached a piercing crescendo, drowning out even the screech of the tracks. The car felt suffocating, as if the walls were pressing inward. And just when Victoria thought she couldn't take another second, that she would crumble completely under the crushing judgment, and the relentless sound movement caught her eye. The man across the aisle had risen from his seat. His daughter clutched his hand, stuffed elephant tucked under her arm, her gaze steady with a compassion far older than her for years. The father's expression was calm, almost gentle, but his presence carried weight. He wasn't approaching like the others, full of scorn or exasperation. He was approaching as if this were his battle too. Victoria's chest tightened. A stranger was walking toward her. The baby still screamed, the passengers still stared, but in that instant, the suspense shifted. A question formed in her mind, sharp and urgent. Why is he coming? And what could he possibly do that she hadn't already tried? Asterisk. The subway lurched again, throwing the passengers forward slightly. Metal grinding against metal in a shriek that layered itself over the baby's cries. Emma's wailing was unrelenting and aching, primal sound that seemed to scrape raw every corner of the car. Victoria's arms shook from exhaustion, her body tense with humiliation, her thoughts spiraling into self-doubt. And then she noticed him. The man who had been sitting across the aisle was now standing, his movements unhurried, as if he carried some invisible calm that resisted the chaos filling the car. His work clothes were plain jeans scuffed at the knees, boots dulled from long days on construction sites, but he walked with a grounded steadiness that drew the eye. At his side, a little girl clutched his hand, her small stuffed elephant dangling from her arm, its once white fur dulled from years of love. Victoria's stomach tightened. She braced herself for criticism, a lecture, or worse, a public scolding. She'd already felt the weight of every other passenger's judgment pressing on her like a verdict. She didn't think she could withstand another blow. The man stopped just before her, lowering his voice so that it barely rose above Emma's shrieks. His tone was careful, respectful, almost apologetic. "Excuse me," he said, his brown eyes meeting hers with steady gentleness. "I don't mean to intrude, but would you mind if I tried something?" Victoria blinked, stunned. For a split second, her defenses flared, her instinct to reject help, to protect her baby from strangers, to keep control at all costs. But she had no control left. The pacifier hadn't worked. The bottle had failed. Rocking, swaying, soothing words, nothing had broken through Emma's storm. And the longer she resisted, the more she could feel the crowd's irritation rising like heat around her. What do you mean?" Her voice trembled. The man shifted slightly, as if choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes babies, they respond to different voices. My daughter Sophia knows a song. It used to calm her down when she was upset. If you're comfortable, we could try singing to her." Victoria's heart lurched. The idea was so simple it sounded absurd, and yet there was something in his tone, A quiet certainty born of lived experience, not theory. Her gaze flicked to the little girl, who looked up at her with wide, solemn eyes far too old for her age. The girl gave a tiny nod, as if to say, "We can help her," round them. The train car had gone oddly quiet. Passengers leaned in, curious. Phones were raised, ready to capture whatever came next. The moment stretched, taut with suspense. Victoria's breath caught. Her rational mind screamed warnings about strangers, about vulnerability. But her heart trod, exhausted. Breaking under the weight of her baby's sobs, knew she had nothing left to lose. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking with desperation. "If you think it might help, please." The man nodded once, the kind of nod that carried quiet resolve. He knelt slightly so his daughter could be eye level with the crying baby. Then, without hesitation, they began to sing. It was a lullaby, soft and lilting, words flowing in Spanish with a cadence that was both unfamiliar and achingly tender. The man's deep baritone wrapped around the melody like a steady anchor, while the girl's high, sweet soprano danced lightly above it. The two voices wove together in harmony, imperfect yet beautiful, carrying with them the weight of memory and love. Something shifted. Emma's cries faltered. At first, just for a breath, as if she were surprised by the new sound cutting through the chaos. Then again another pause, her tiny chest heaving as her fists still. Her wide, wet eyes blinked, transfixed by the strange duet rising above the clatter of wheels and the hum of fluorescent lights. The lullaby continued, soft but insistent, each note layered with something more powerful than technique, history, comfort, a mother's memory carried on by those left behind. The baby's cries dissolved into hiccups, then into silence. Slowly, unbelievably, Emma's eyelids drooped, her body relaxing against Victoria's chest as if the song had wrapped her in invisible arms. The entire subway car changed. Passengers who had rolled their eyes and muttered curses moments before now sat in stunned silence, their expressions softening. One woman pressed a hand to her chest, another smiled faintly through tears. Someone near the back raised their phone, recording a moment that felt too extraordinary to belong to an ordinary commute. The judgment evaporated, replaced by something electric, collective wonder. Victoria's throat tightened, her vision blurring with tears. Relief surged through her in a wave so intense it left her trembling. She looked at the man and his daughter, their voices still carrying the lullaby as though the world around them had disappeared. And for the first time that day, she felt not alone, not judged, but seen. As the final note lingered in the air, swallowed slowly by the rhythm of the train. Emma's tiny hand curled into a fist around Victoria's finger. She was asleep, peaceful, safe. Victoria met the man's eyes again. The weight of gratitude in her chest was almost unbearable. She whispered, "Thank you," but even as she said it, she knew the words could never capture what had just happened. The subway doors slid open at the next stop with a hiss, and a few passengers stepped off, replaced by others who shuffled in cautiously, as though they didn't want to disturb the fragile peace that had just descended. Emma slept soundly against Victoria's chest now, her tiny fingers curled around the lapel of her blazer, her breath soft and rhythmic. The same baby who had filled the car with piercing wails minutes earlier was now an image of perfect serenity. The hush in the car remained, an unspoken acknowledgement that everyone had just witnessed something rare. The lullaby lingered like incense, invisible but present, and the judgment that had pressed down on Victoria had evaporated, replaced by something she hadn't felt in months. Comfort. Victoria blinked back tears, stroking Emma's downy hair as her eyes lifted to the man and the little girl beside him. The man gave a small nod, almost as though to say there, "It's all right now," and began to move back to his seat. But before he could, the words burst from Victoria, raw and breathless. "Wait," she said. Her voice cracked, but she didn't care. She looked at him, really looked at him. His shirt was worn, collar faded, his boots scuffed. His hands were rough, the hands of someone who worked with stone, steel, and sweat. And yet those same hands had just helped soothe her daughter without ever touching her. "I don't know how you did that," she whispered, her throat tight. "But, thank you." He hesitated, eyes lowering in modesty. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "babies just need to know they're safe. Doesn't matter who it comes from. My wife used to sing that song before she passed." His voice softened, almost breaking on the last word. He cleared his throat, masking it with quiet strength. "I sing it now for my daughter when she's scared. I guess tonight, it worked for yours too." Victoria's breath caught. She glanced down at the little girl Sophia. He had called her and saw the stuffed elephant tucked in her arm. A toy clearly loved past its years. It seems worn thin, but held together by care. The child met her gaze shyly, but her eyes were luminous with pride. As if she knew she had just played a part in something extraordinary, Victoria's heart clenched. She had spent months drowning in books about parenting, expert strategies, schedules, and formulas. Yet here stood a man who had given her more in 5 minutes than all the experts' combined patience, presence, and a song born of loss, but gifted freely to her daughter. The train rumbled forward again, jolting slightly, but Victoria hardly noticed. She reached into her bag with trembling fingers, pulled out a sleek ivory business card, and held it toward him. "My name is Victoria Ashford," she said, her voice steadier now though her pulse raced. "This is Emma, and you are?" He accepted the card awkwardly, turning it in his hand as if unsure what to do with it. "Marcus Rivera," he said finally, "and this is Sophia." He gave the girl's hand a small squeeze, and she smiled faintly. Victoria looked at Sophia with genuine warmth. "Sophia, thank you for sharing your song with Emma. I think she really needed to hear it tonight." The little girl ducked her head shyly, hugging her elephant tighter, but her small smile widened. The moment could have ended there. Marcus seemed ready to return to his seat, ready to let this exchange dissolve into the blur of New York anonymity. But Victoria couldn't. She felt something shift inside her, a pulse she couldn't ignore. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the way the lullaby had cracked something open in her chest. Whatever it was, she found herself speaking before doubt could silence her. "I know this might sound strange," she said, her words rushing now, urgent as the train prepared to stop again. "But I'd like to thank you properly. Would you and Sophia like to have dinner sometime? My treat, please." Marcus's brows furrowed, surprise flashing across his face. He glanced down at the card again, then back up at her. "Miss Ashford," he said carefully, "that's very kind, but you don't owe us anything. We were just helping." Victoria shook her head. "You don't understand. In my world, people rarely help without expecting something in return. You gave me peace tonight when I thought I'd lost all control. That's not something I can forget. Please," her voice softened, almost pleading. "It would mean a lot." The train slowed, screeching as it pulled into her stop. Passengers shuffled toward the doors, pushing past in a rush. Victoria tightened her grip on Emma, but her gaze stayed on Marcus. For one suspended heartbeat, it felt as if the entire city was holding its breath, waiting for his answer. The doors opened with a chime. She stepped toward them, her heart racing. Just before the crowd swept her onto the platform, she looked back one last time. "Think about it," she said, her voice carrying through the noise. "Please." And then she was gone, the door sliding shut behind her, leaving Marcus staring at the ivory card in his rough hands. He glanced down at Sophia, who looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. "Papa," she asked softly, "are we going to dinner with them?" Marcus exhaled slowly, the weight of the card heavy in his pocket, and the question lingered in the stale subway air. Asterisk 3 days later, the quiet hum of a modest Brooklyn family restaurant wrapped itself around Marcus Rivera. As he held the door open for his daughter, Sophia stepped in first, her stuffed elephant clutched close despite Marcus's gentle suggestion that maybe tonight she could leave it at home. She had shaken her head with the seriousness of a judge and whispered, "He needs to come." Marcus hadn't argued. The restaurant smelled of garlic, simmering tomatoes, and fresh bread. Booths lined the walls, occupied by families sharing pizza, couples splitting pasta, and friends laughing over plates of steaming food. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, alive with the kind of laughter Marcus hadn't heard in his own home for too long. He straightened his shirt freshly washed, but frayed at the cuffs, and scanned the room. His chest tightened. Part of him still didn't believe he was here, that he'd agreed to this at all. A dinner with a millionaire businesswoman who lived in a world of boardrooms, tailored suits, and million-dollar contracts. He told himself he'd come only for Sophia, that it might be good for her to meet someone new, someone kind. But if he was honest, curiosity had tugged at him to curiosity about the woman on the train, who'd looked flawless on the outside, but had been cracked wide open by a baby's cry, "Papa." Sophia tugged his sleeve, pointing. There she was. Victoria Ashford sat at a booth near the window, her posture still elegant, but her cream blazer had been replaced by a soft sweater in pale blue. Her blonde hair was swept into a simple braid, wisps falling loose around her face, and in her arms, Emma. The baby, who had once shattered a subway car with her cries, now gurgled softly. Reaching for a toy dangling from Victoria's bag, Victoria looked up, her eyes catching Marcus's across the room. She smiled, not the polite, professional smile of someone used to making impressions, but something gentler, something uncertain. A smile of recognition, relief, even. Marcus, Sophia. Her voice was warmer than he remembered. I'm so glad you came. Marcus slid into the booth across from her, Sophia climbing in beside him. For a moment, they sat in silence, the clink of silverware and hum of conversation filling the space. It felt fragile, this meeting of worlds testing the air between them. Unsure if the bridge that had formed on the subway could hold here, a server came. Menus were exchanged, waters poured. Sophia swung her legs beneath the table, eyes wide as she studied Emma. The baby cooed, fascinated by the stuffed elephant in Sophia's lap. Her name's Emma, Victoria said softly, as if introducing her all over again. And this is Mr. Elephant, Sophia replied solemnly, holding out the toy. He's been mine since I was a baby. He makes people feel better, Emma gurgled, reaching a tiny hand toward the toy. Sophia's face lit with pride. See, Papa? She likes him. Victoria's throat tightened. She'd read countless parenting books that told her how to structure playtime, how to stimulate learning, how to build confidence. But here was a 4-year-old girl offering something far more powerful: comfort, presence, and a piece of herself. Marcus cleared his throat. Sophia doesn't share him with just anyone, he said. That's a big deal. Victoria met his gaze, and for a heartbeat, the noise of the restaurant faded. She saw the depth in his eyes: sorrow, yes, but also resilience. A man who had carried more than his share of loss and still found ways to give God as dinner unfolded. The distance between them began to shrink. Victoria learned about Marcus's long days on construction sites, about the endless medical bills and the jobs he couldn't refuse because Sophia needed medicine more than he needed sleep. He told her about Maria, his late wife, how she used to hum lullabies while stirring arroz con leche on the stove, how her voice lingered in every song he now sang with Sophia. Victoria listened, her heart aching. She confessed things she rarely admitted even to friends, that her company's success sometimes felt like a gilded cage, that she lay awake at night worrying she wasn't enough for Emma, that the advice of experts left her feeling more inadequate than prepared. You know, she said, watching Sophia patiently show Emma how to shake a rattle from her purse. I realized something that night on the subway. I've been so focused on doing everything right on the perfect books, the perfect schedules, that I've been missing what really matters. Marcus tilted his head. And what's that? She smiled faintly, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. Being present, responding to what your child needs in the moment. That's what I saw in you, in both of you. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching Sophia laugh as Emma clutched the rattle with fumbling fingers. His voice was low when he spoke again. Maria used to say, kids don't need perfect parents. They need real ones. Parents who show up. Parents who love them, even when they're tired, even when they don't have all the answers. The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Victoria swallowed hard. The powerful CEO, who had once felt unshakable, now sat humbled across from a man whose wealth was measured not in millions, but in patience and love. She felt something shift inside her, something more powerful than embarrassment, more potent than gratitude. It was recognition that maybe, just maybe, this man and his daughter had something to teach her, something she couldn't buy, couldn't strategize, couldn't conquer with intellect, something she needed more than she had ever realized. Time did not rush them. It carried them gently, like the tide pulling them into a new current neither had expected. Weeks turned into months, and what began as a single dinner became another, then a picnic in Prospect Park, then afternoons spent at playgrounds where Sophia pushed Emma on the baby swings while Marcus and Victoria sat side by side on a weathered bench. They talked not in the clipped, efficient tones of Victoria's boardrooms, but in the slower, unguarded rhythms of people rediscovering trust. For the first time in years, Victoria silenced her phone during these moments. She let emails pile up. She let deals wait, because the world she had built with spreadsheets and strategy couldn't compare to the one unfolding here, one rattle giggle at a time, one lullaby at a time. Emma bloomed under it. She wasn't just calmer, she was brighter, more responsive, her giggles bursting like sunlight whenever Sophia played peekaboo. And Sophia, who had once carried her grief quietly in her small chest, began to laugh more freely. her elephant clutched in one hand as she toddled beside Emma with the confidence of a big sister. Marcus saw it too. He saw his daughter's lungs filling with easier breaths, not just because of the medicine Victoria had helped him secure through her connections, but because she had been given something beyond medicine, joy, the kind of joy that comes from not carrying the world alone. And Marcus himself, he was changing too. The man who had thought his life would be only survival work, bills, bedtime songs in the dark began to imagine again. With Victoria's help, he stepped out of day labor and into a foreman's role at a company that offered benefits, stability, a future. He began sketching plans again, something he hadn't done since Maria died, plans for the kind of contracting business he once dreamed of building. But if Marcus gained stability, Victoria gained something rarer. She gained stillness. The woman who had once built her identity on control learned, through Marcus, the power of presence. Through Sophia, she learned that love could be fierce and simple at once. Through Emma, she learned that even in the chaos of sleepless nights and public meltdowns, motherhood wasn't about perfection, it was about showing up, imperfect and whole. And through all of it, they grew closer, slowly, carefully, like the pieces of music written in different keys. Finding harmony note by note. The subway became their symbol. They returned there once, months later, riding the same line with their girls. Emma, now old enough to babble, tugged on Sophia's hand, and the four of them sat together, laughter rising above the rattle of the train. Passengers glanced over, some smiling, others curious, but this time there was no judgment, only recognition. Victoria leaned close to Marcus, her voice a whisper just for him. It still amazes me. That day I thought I was breaking apart. She looked at Emma, at Sophia, at the unlikely family they had become. Her throat tightened. It turned out to be the day everything came together. Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked at her, taking in the woman who had traded her armor for vulnerability, who had let a stranger's song into her life and, in doing so, opened a door neither of them had known they needed. He reached for her hand, rough palm against her manicured fingers. His voice was steady, quiet. Sometimes, he said, the worst moments carry the seeds of the best. You just don't see it until later. The train roared into the next station, doors sliding open to strangers stepping on and off, their lives colliding for brief seconds. None of them knew the story of the crying baby, the lullaby, the business card, the dinner. None of them knew that a family had been born here, in the most ordinary of places. But Victoria and Marcus knew. Sophia and Emma knew. And that was enough. As the train lurched forward again, Sophia began humming softly, the familiar melody of the Spanish lullaby filling the space between them. Emma gurgled, clapping her little hands. Victoria's chest swelled, tears pricking her eyes, because she understood now. The lullaby wasn't just a song. It was a bridge, from grief to hope, from strangers to family. And as the voices of a widowed father, a once lonely mother, and to little girls wove together into something larger than themselves, Victoria realized the shocking truth. The moment she had once believed was her greatest humiliation, the subway cry that had broken her, had in fact been the moment she was given everything she didn't know she was missing: a new family, a new beginning, proof that sometimes the most beautiful music is born not in silence, but in the chaos of a crowded train, when someone chooses kindness instead of judgment, and a song carries broken hearts into harmony.